about this since Elder John had spoken to me about coming here, and Meredith and I prayed about it. We talked about it, and what would be a message? What would I say? And I thought, that one of the things that I would like to do is I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what the Lord has done in my life and how blessed I've been because of, I can't tell you how many churches just like this over a period of a lot of years that shaped my life. Well, while I'm a lawyer or I'm this or whatever, at the very heart of me, I'm a Christian. I'm a minister. I'm here to help people, to love for us to love each other and for us to build on that love so that we can be better people. So let me tell you a little bit about my life, and as I do that, I'm really going to tell you about the lives of some real important people in my life that shaped it, and for whom I am blessed to have known them, and yet I think just hearing about their lives in some ways can be a blessing to you as well. I started preaching the gospel when I was 15. I was invited to come to the Church of Christ in Lamar, Oklahoma. It was a small congregation. There weren't very many members there, and I preached twice a month. And I would go out. Brother Robinson was an elderly gentleman. He was probably in his 80s, and he was always there to make sure that the lights were on, the building was open, and when it was cold in the winter, he always had the fires going. And what a great man, an older man in many ways. That's what he could do, but that's what he wanted to do, and that was the gift that he gave the Lord. Now, when I began my ministry, there was a certain person in that was kind of my teammate, and that was my grandmother, who I called Meemaw. And Meemaw said, "I want you to preach the gospel." And so she went with me when I started preaching, and she would be there every Sunday. And at the end of the sermon, when we'd drive back home, she'd tell me what I did wrong, and and she'd say, "You're going to have to get better than that, or you're never going to amount to much of anything." But she was kind-hearted, and she was loving with me. And I can remember as a kid, this would mean more probably then than it does now. I was just turning 16, and my grandmother had a great big old white Buick. And she'd say, "Now, Oliver, I'll let you drive that Buick out to Lamar." And that was one of the great things in life, was my grandmother and I would ride together out there to that church, and we'd talk on the way out, and then I'd get her critique of what I had to say on the way back. And she and I became very close as a result of those trips together and that time together. And she said, "Now, I want to tell you that whatever those folks give you for preaching this sermon," she said, "I'm going to match the pot." Well, I prayed hard, because the pot was usually going to either be $5 or $6, but if it was $6, I was going to get $12 instead of $10. But she taught me about that, and she taught me about the fact that we are all in this with every part of our lives. It's our money, it's our talents, it's all that we've got to give. God expects all of it. And if we're going to be Christians, that's what we're going to do. And she helped me, I think, from that early age to see that. I say we because she came with me to the next church too. I moved over to Pleasant Ridge. It was a little bit further, but I got $10 instead of $5. And there were some really wonderful people in that congregation. I think of Brother Banta, and Brother Banta was a man who was up in years, and yet one of the things that he taught me, even as an older man, was how he loved young people, and how he had a vision for the fact that the church wasn't going to make it if we don't have young people. And you got to do that. We've got to help these kids understand how important it is to have Jesus in their life and have value in their life. It's not just money, it's value. It's love and faith and dedication and fairness and honesty. It's all those things. And I think Brother Banner, being an older man, and he would talk to me, and you know, one of the things that he liked to do every summer is we'd have a gospel meeting in the summer, and it was one of those outdoor meetings, and we'd string the lights up, and we'd sit outside, and he always wanted to, and he always made sure that on Friday night we had a special youth night, and when we got through, we'd have a wiener roast, and the kids would play games. And you know, I look back on that, and here was a man, you know, that understood that, you know, that God loves young people. And he needs young people, just as they need him so desperately. And you know, so I learned that lesson when I was there in Pleasant Ridge, Oklahoma. And then, just about that time, Meredith and I decided that we'd like to get married, and we did. And I moved to my third church, and that was in Atwood, Oklahoma. You probably never heard of any of these places, but in any event, Atwood was yet a little bigger church yet. And when I first started preaching there, before I was married, they gave me $25 a week. And when I got married, the elders came to me and said, "You're a married man, son. You need $35 a week." That's what I said. That's just exactly what I said. And I thought, my goodness, I'm making $35 a week. I'm not worth any part of that, but I'm going to take it because they ought to give it to me, and I'm going to use it as best I can. And we worshiped there in Atwood for about 3 years. You know, and you think back about people that you just remember. There was Sister Julian. Sister Julian had polio when she was a girl, and she was extremely crippled. And yet, at the same time, I've never seen a sweeter woman and a kinder woman. And she wasn't bitter. She loved her Lord, you know, and she loved her friends. And you know, you could look at that woman that was in a way deformed, and she could not do all the things that all the rest of us could do. But I never once, not ever one time, did she ever say anything to me griping about what had happened to her in her life. You know, you learn from listening to other people. You learn from seeing how people have gone through things at least as bad as you've gone through, and they still love the Lord, and they still love their families, and they love their friends. It's hard, you know. I got to tell you, it's easier to preach it than it is to live it. I can promise you that. But the truth of the matter is that I think as a preacher, I learned more than I ever taught, because I saw what people's lives, what they went through, what they dealt with, and how they found a way to love the Lord, you know, through it all. And those are the lessons that I got to tell you that I hope I taught, and I think we did. Meredith and I did the best we could. That we tried to teach our 3 daughters, and now our grandkids, because you know it goes from generation to generation. And if we don't teach it, if we don't teach people the principles of life that are really important, they aren't going to get it. They're not going to get it on television. They're not going to get it someplace else. It's going to be in churches like this. It's going to be in homes. It's going to be in groups of Christians and people of faith. That we've got a great blessing in our young people. And I learned early on what a responsibility it was, you know, to be involved in that kind of work. And come right in. We're just getting started here. And so anyway, those were the churches that I preached at Oklahoma: Lamar, Pleasant Ridge, and Atwood. And then in 1967, I graduated from college, and I decided I was going to go to Abilene Christian College in Abilene, Texas, and I was going to work on a master's degree, and I was going to try to prepare myself to be able not only preach, but maybe someday teach in a Christian college. So we went to Abilene. We moved there, and we basically lived in Abilene, Texas, about 3 years, from about And so for about 3 years, we lived in that area. And while we were there, I preached at a church called Cisco, Texas. And Cisco was about 45 minutes to the east of Abilene. And once again, what you saw in these little churches in the smaller towns is that among the faithful, among the ones that were there week in and week out, it almost always was more our sisters and our brothers. I don't know why that has been, but I look back and I think about some of those women that were in that congregation and how, how much they did. I mean, they always had something going on to help somebody in need. They were always kind and gentle with us. And one of the ministries that they had, even though they were a very small church, there was another church just down the road, about 20 minutes further to the east, called Ranger, Texas. And in Ranger, Texas, there was an African American church that was there. And they had a minister that would come down from Fort Worth 3 weeks a month. But he couldn't get out and come down on the 4th. So on the 4th Sunday, we always had our service in Cisco, and we all got up and we drove to Ranger. And we sat down with our brothers and sisters in Ranger, and, I preached again, and I came back to Cisco, and they wanted to hear more, and so I did that too. So we had kind of a 3 times a day on that one. But in doing that, we began to learn. Meredith and I learned, and as we were growing, just how many people in the world there were, and how many types of people, and how many places they had come from, and how many good things could be done by those people. If you can work with people and make them love the Lord and understand their talents, and if we can make ourselves giving people and sharing people, that's the way the world gets better. It doesn't get better with a hydrogen bomb. It doesn't get better with some huge oil pipeline. It gets better as people are better, as we're better neighbors, as we're better friends, as we're better Christians. And that's, those lessons I learned as a young man, and I've never really forgotten them. They've always been there in my life, and I thank God again for all of that. There was a period of time going on about the same time when I became the minister on kind of a youth minister basis in New Mexico. And it was in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, which was kind of a touristy town in the summer. But there were some really great people that were in that church, and they wanted to build the youth program there. And so I was out there, and for 3 summers in a row, the 4th summer we were married, and the first 2 summers I lived with other families. And I got to tell you a story about one of them. I lived with some folks, and they lived in a place that was way out from Cloudcroft. Cloudcroft was about 8,000 feet up in the mountains. And then as you went south, there was a place called Sunspot, and that's where there's a huge telescope that watches the sun every day. And one of the members of our church was one of the main maintenance guys for taking care of that big facility. And then there were some people that lived out in that same area, but you could go 4 or 5 miles and you wouldn't see a living soul. And so I was living with some folks one summer in a house that was about 5 miles away from the nearest neighbor. And they let me know one time that they were getting ready to leave for the weekend. It was just going to be me for the weekend out there. And I wasn't a scaredy cat, but I thought, man, this is a big old place out here. And I wonder about all this. Well, Sunday night about 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, I got to hearing all this ruckus going on, and it was the family that had just gotten back from their 3-day vacation. And I jumped up, and they came pounding on the door, and they said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, there's been a bear in the house with you half the evening." And I didn't even know he was there. All I could figure out is the bear took a look at me and said it wasn't worth it, and went on someplace else. But, those people worried about me. I guess they were more worried almost than I was. I was asleep, so I wasn't all that worried. But you think back about that, and you think about living with those folks that summer and getting to know their kids. And again, what I was learning, I think, as a young man trying to grow up and trying to understand life is that we gotta find ways to reach each other. We've got to figure out ways that old people can be respected by young people, and at the same time, older people, just like me, have the energy level to reach out to young people and help guide them. If the world ever needed anything, it needs guidance for its young people right now. And I think I saw that in so many of these people that I was fortunate enough to know as I was a young man, as we were kind of forging our way along, and as Meredith and I were just beginning our lives together as well. Well, I'll tell you about two other places, and that's probably enough. And so, but it really kind of incorporates a whole lot of what I did as a minister in the 17 years in which I preached, just as I said earlier, about every Sunday, and was involved very directly in the church for those 17 years. We then moved from Oklahoma City, where we were living for a year. I was teaching there, and we moved to a place called Sunman, Indiana. And Sunman, Indiana was a little town not very far from Cincinnati, Ohio. And it was about 45 minutes into Cincinnati, and there was a family there that was really kind of the core of the church, the Campbell family. And Mamaw and Papaw were the grandmother, granddad. They were kind of the patriarch and matriarch of that family. And they had like 8 kids, and it was a wonderful, wonderful group of people. And the Campbells were so good to Meredith and me. And we learned so much about, seeing what it was to have a big family, and seeing how, even in a big family, that you can get along, that you can help each other, that you can work together and make things better. And I tell you that, Mamaw and Papaw Campbell just never missed an opportunity to do a good deed. We didn't have a place to live. There wasn't any place really to live in Sunman, and they bought a trailer house for us, and they put it there next to the church, and we had a place to live while we were there. And, I'm sure that wasn't easy. Papaw Campbell was in his 80s, and yet, there's something about the spirit of love and the spirit of generosity that doesn't get too old. I mean, it just lives on, and we need to learn that. We don't retire from being a Christian, and I have to say that to myself a lot now that I'm 70. Is that you can't just say, okay, I've done it, I'm done. And we all have to keep going. Well, let me tell you one more place, and then that'll be enough. We ended up moving from Sunman, Indiana, into Cincinnati, Ohio, and to a place called Norwood, and we had a fairly small church in Norwood, although it was a bigger church than one that I'd ever had before. It was about 150 people probably, but it wasn't a big church by big city standards by any means. And when we moved there, we just were totally touched by how kind the people were that were in that congregation. And one of the first things that we were told when we became the minister family there, and by this time we had 3 kids of our own, was you got to go meet Lottie. She is the total backbone of this church. She is the heart and soul of this church, and you've got to go meet Lottie. And I thought, who in the world is this woman? I mean, they're talking about her in such a way that they're just saying, I promise you, your life will be better if you go meet Lottie. And so I went to meet Lottie. She lived in a little old apartment on about the second or third story of an old halfway burned out building down by the Ohio River, just on the north bank of the Ohio River. And you climbed up those stairs. And what you saw when you got to the top of the stairs and you saw that little apartment where Lottie lived is you saw this little old woman who did not have any legs, did not have any arms, and she was totally blind. But there was something about her that caused the whole faith of the church to be ignited with love and the concept of faithfulness by Lottie. What a blessing to see that and to know that. And don't tell me you can't do anything. Not when you've seen Lottie, you can't tell anybody that. Because if you can't see and you can't walk and you can't even use your hands, but you can still bring a church together and make people love each other and tell people how grateful they ought to be, it tells us that we can all do that. And I do remember, I have a very, very clear recollection of the day that Lottie passed away from this earth to go home to her reward. And it was a cold, cold day. It was snowing, and we had her kind of last services, the funeral service, if you will, at this cemetery in northern Kentucky. And there were a group of women primarily, but some of the men as well from the church. And as we stood outside and kind of paid our last rites to Lottie, all of a sudden these beautiful ice crystals began to fall from the sky. It was not unusual. You could see this before, but there as we were saying the last words about Lottie, and those beautiful ice crystals fell from heaven. One could say to oneself that maybe God in heaven was crying at the loss of this one because of what she meant and what she was worth as a human being. And so, folks, all I can say to you is that what I have learned wherever I've been is that life is a whole lot more about what's inside of you than what's outside of you. And it's not easy. And there's no promises that it's going to be a walk down cherry lane. It isn't. There's going to be thorns. There's going to be thistles. There's going to be hail. There's going to be snow and ice. But there's going to be a reward for those that are strong and faithful and love each other and love the Lord. And that's the message, the only message that I know how to preach, Brother Johnny. That's the only message I know how to preach. It's a great gift that you've given me to be able to be here today and to speak to all of you and to share these things, but also to know how good all of you people are. And I want you to know I don't know anybody that I respect any more than this guy sitting right over here. And you're very fortunate that you have the kind of man of faith and wisdom and goodness that he has. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear God, you give us everything. We want more, but we know that what you give us is what we are to have. We know that life is not something that you've promised us will be free of pain or sorrow or difficulties, but we do believe, Lord, that if you are standing by our side, all of those we can take. We can uphold. We can hold up our end of the bargain and depart. And so, Lord, keep us in the spirit of faith and trust, even when we have to question and even when we have doubt. Give us a spirit of faith and belief. And sometimes when we get upset and when we get mad with others, even those that we love, give us a spirit of charity and forgiveness and make us the kind of person that Jesus was. It's his name we pray in. Amen.